The snow fell gently over Boston's Back Bay, dusting the cobblestone streets with a shimmering veil that caught the glow of twinkling Christmas lights. The upscale restaurant, L'Auberge's golden chandeliers, cast a warm ambiance, their reflections dancing on crystal wine glasses and polished silverware. The air hummed with festive cheer, couples clinked glasses. Families laughed over shared stories, and a soft rendition of Silent Night played from a pianist in the corner. Amid this holiday splendor, James Carter, a 32-year-old white American accountant with neatly combed blonde hair and a nervous smile, adjusted his navy blue tie for the third time that evening. His pale skin flushed slightly under the collar of his tailored overcoat, not from the cold, but from the moment's weight. He clutched a small velvet box in his pocket, containing a diamond ring, its single stone gleaming with a promise he had spent months planning. James had always been a planner, a trait honed by years of balancing ledgers and navigating the financial pitfalls of his clients. Growing up in a modest suburb of Boston, he had learned to trust too easily, a habit that cost him dearly when a business partner swindled him out of his savings 5 years ago. That betrayal had left him cautious, but Vanessa Reed, his 30-year-old girlfriend, had rekindled his faith in love. Her charm, sharp wit, and poised elegance had captivated him 2 years ago at a charity gala where she spoke passionately about art preservation. Tonight on Christmas Eve, James was ready to propose to bind their lives with a ring that had cost him nearly half his savings. He glanced at his watch, 7:15 p.m., and took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. The restaurant's festive decor, with wreaths of holly and golden bells swaying above, felt like the perfect stage for his life's most important question. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes later, her heels clicking confidently down the central aisle. Her sleek auburn hair, pinned in an elegant chignon, complemented her emerald green coat, which she shed to reveal a tailored dress that drew admiring glances from nearby diners. Her demeanor, however, was calm, her smile perfunctory as she leaned in to kiss James on the cheek. "Traffic was a nightmare," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "This city's a mess in December." James, accustomed to her brisk manner, smiled warmly, his blue eyes softening. He gestured for her to sit, signaling the waiter for a bottle of their finest Cabernet. Vanessa approved with a nod, leaning back in her chair, her gaze flickering to her phone before returning to him. Finally, here she added her tone, hinting at impatience. James ignored the slight edge, chalking it up to her demanding job as an art curator, a role that often kept her distracted. James's hand drifted to his pocket as the waiter poured the wine, feeling the velvet box's reassuring weight. He imagined the moment slipping the ring onto her finger, her eyes lighting up, the room fading away as they sealed their future. He spoke animatedly about their plans for Christmas Day, hinting at a surprise, without revealing too much. "Tomorrow will be special," he said, his voice bright with anticipation. Vanessa raised an eyebrow, her lips curving slightly. "It better be," she replied, sipping her wine, her attention drifting to the glittering decorations around them. James didn't notice the faint detachment in her eyes, too caught up in his vision of their shared future. The restaurant buzzed with holiday energy, couples, toasting children, giggling over dessert, and the clink of glasses mingling with the pianist's notes. Above their table, a sprig of mistletoe hung its berries, catching the light. James's heart raced as he rehearsed his proposal in his mind, searching for the perfect moment to kneel. Vanessa, however, seemed preoccupied, her fingers tapping her phone screen under the table. "Work?" James asked, trying to draw her back. She shook her head, offering a quick smile and just checking messages. "You know how it is." He nodded, pushing aside a twinge of unease. This was their night, and nothing could dim its shine, or so he thought. Across the room, a subtle movement caught Vanessa's eye. The tablecloth at a nearby table trembled as if nudged by an unseen hand. She frowned, leaning slightly to the side, her sharp gaze narrowing. "James," she said, her voice low but pointed. "There's someone under that table." James followed her gaze, spotting a thin, dark hand clutching the cloth's edge before it vanished. Vanessa's lips tightened, and she raised a hand to summon the waiter. "This is unacceptable," she said, her tone sharp. "Someone's ruining our evening." The waiter, a young man with a nervous expression, approached the table and lifted the cloth, revealing a young woman huddled beneath. She was Lila Thompson, a 28-year-old Black American woman, her skin a deep brown, her tightly coiled hair braided into small fraying rows. Her worn coat, patched and damp from melted snow, barely shielded her from the December chill. Lila's brown eyes, wide with fear, darted between the waiter and the couple. She had slipped into the restaurant to escape the biting cold, her breath visible in the icy air outside. Once a nurse's aide with dreams of nursing school, Lila had lost her job 6 months ago, when her hospital cut staff, leaving her to drift through Boston's unforgiving streets. James's heart sank at the sight of her trembling form, her thin frame betraying days of hunger and exhaustion. "Wait," he said to the waiter, his voice firm but gentle. "Don't throw her out." "What's your name?" Lila hesitated, her hands wringing together. "Lila," she whispered, barely audible. It's so cold outside." Vanessa rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is a fine dining restaurant, not a shelter." James shot her a look, his compassion overriding her coldness. "Let her stay a bit warm up," he said to the waiter, then turned to the manager who had approached, flustered by the scene. "I'll cover any costs. Just let her have some food." Vanessa's frown deepened, but she forced a tight smile, aware of the curious glances from nearby diners. Lila stood uncertain, her eyes reflecting gratitude and shame, as James's kindness clashed with Vanessa's disapproval, setting the stage for a night that would unravel their lives. The restaurant's golden glow seemed to dim around Lila, as she stood exposed under the scrutiny of the l'auberge diners. The pianist's soft chords faltered briefly, and whispers rippled through the crowd, their eyes darting between the shivering young woman and the impeccably dressed couple at the center table. Lila's frayed coat hung loosely on her thin frame, the damp patches glistening under the chandelier light. Her braided hair, matted from days without care, framed a face taut with fear and humiliation. She clutched her hands together, nails bitten to the quick, as the manager, a wiry man with a strained expression, hesitated, glancing between her and Vanessa's impatient glare. Vanessa leaned forward, her emerald dress catching the light as she spoke, her voice sharp enough to cut through the festive hum. "This is absurd. We're here for a private dinner, not a charity event." She waved a manicured hand toward Lila, as if dismissing a stray animal. "Can you please handle this? It's ruining the evening." Her words dripped with disdain, but her eyes flicked to the surrounding tables, aware of the growing audience. She adjusted her posture, ensuring her elegance remained intact, a habit honed from years of navigating high society to mask her past financial ruin. James, however, felt a pang in his chest as he looked at Lila. Her eyes, wide and pleading, reminded him of his younger sister, who had once struggled with addiction before he helped her find stability. He couldn't ignore the desperation in Lila's trembling form, her breath still shallow from the cold. "Hold on," he said, raising a hand to stop the manager who was already motioning for security. "She's not hurting anyone. Let her stay just for a bit to warm up." His tone was firm but gentle, his blue eyes locking onto Lila's. "You said your name's Lila, right? Why are you here?" Lila's throat tightened, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean to cause trouble. It's freezing outside and I had nowhere else to go." Her words hung in the air, fragile and raw. exposing a vulnerability that made James's resolve harden. He turned to the manager. "Bring her some soup and bread. I'll cover it." The manager hesitated, glancing at Vanessa, whose lips pressed into a thin line. "James, darling," she said, her voice softening for the onlookers. "We wouldn't want to be cruel, but this isn't the place. People might take advantage." Her smile was calculated a veneer of concern, masking her irritation. James ignored her, gesturing for Lila to sit at a nearby empty table. The waiter, still flustered, hurried to comply, setting down a steaming bowl of vegetable soup and a crusty roll. Lila's hands shook as she reached for the spoon, her eyes darting nervously between James and the staring diners. "Thank you," she murmured, barely audible, her gratitude laced with shame. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, and the warmth of the soup was a fleeting reprieve from the gnawing hunger that had become her constant companion. She avoided Vanessa's gaze as she sipped, sensing the woman's barely concealed contempt. Vanessa tapped her nails on the table, her impatience growing. She leaned toward James, lowering her voice. "This is our night, James. I planned something special for us. Can we focus on that?" Her words were laced with a subtle accusation, as if Lila's presence was a personal affront. James nodded, but his attention remained on Lila, who ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it might be her last. He couldn't shake the image of her huddled under the table, a stark contrast to the festive opulence around them. The mistletoe above swayed gently, its berries mocking the warmth he had hoped to share with Vanessa tonight. As the meal progressed, the restaurant's festive chatter resumed, though whispers about the homeless girl lingered. James tried to steer the conversation back to Christmas plans, mentioning a surprise he had in store. But Vanessa's responses were curt, her eyes flicking to her phone. "Work never stops," she said, brushing off his concern. James forced a smile, his fingers brushing the velvet box in his pocket. He wanted to believe her distance was just stress, that the proposal would rekindle their spark. But a seed of doubt took root, fueled by her coldness toward Lila. The manager, now hovering nearby, approached cautiously. "Sir, we appreciate your kindness, but we need to maintain order. If she's done eating..." He trailed off, uncomfortable under James's steady gaze. "She stays until she's warm," James replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. Lila glanced up, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment, silently acknowledging his compassion. Vanessa scoffed softly, her fingers tightening around her wineglass. "Fine," she said, her tone clipped. "But don't expect me to play saint." She stood smoothing her dress and excused herself to the restroom, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. In that moment, Lila felt the weight of her situation more acutely. She wasn't just an intruder in this glittering world, but a pawn in a tension she didn't fully understand. James's kindness was a lifeline, but Vanessa's hostility warned of consequences. As she finished her soup, the warmth in her stomach couldn't erase the chill of uncertainty. The restaurant's lights twinkled, the pianist struck up jingle bells, and the night seemed to hold its breath, poised on the edge of a drama none of them could yet foresee. The clink of silverware and murmurs of festive diners filled l'auberge as Lila sat at her small table, the warmth of the vegetable soup fading in her stomach. The restaurant's golden lights reflected off the polished floor, but the glow felt distant, as if it belonged to a world she could only glimpse. Her frayed coat, still damp from the snow, clung to her shoulders, a reminder of the biting cold waiting outside. Across the room, James stood at the counter, settling the bill with the manager, his broad frame relaxed but attentive, his blonde hair catching the chandelier's gleam. Lila watched him, her heart heavy with gratitude for his kindness, yet shadowed by the shame of her intrusion. Vanessa, however, had vanished down a hallway toward the restroom, and her absence was a brief reprieve from her piercing disapproval. Lila's eyes drifted to the mistletoe above James's table, its berries a cruel mockery of the connection she lacked. She had once dreamed of a life filled with purpose, caring for patients, saving for nursing school. But those dreams had crumbled when her job vanished. Now survival meant scavenging for warmth and scraps each day, a battle against hunger and despair. As she pushed the last piece of bread into her mouth, savoring its fleeting comfort, a shadow fell over her table. Vanessa stood before her, her emerald dress shimmering, her auburn hair flawless in its chignon. Her smile was tight, almost predatory, as she leaned in, her voice low to avoid the ears of nearby diners. "Lila," Vanessa said, her tone laced with false warmth. She slid into the chair opposite her, movements graceful but calculated. "You're in quite a predicament, aren't you? Hiding under tables hoping for handouts." Lila stiffened, her hands curling into fists under the table. Vanessa's words stung, but the truth in them burned deeper. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Lila murmured, her voice barely audible over the pianist's rendition of "O Holy Night." Vanessa waved a dismissive hand, her manicured nails glinting. "Oh, I'm sure. But let's be practical. You need help and I need a favor." Lila's stomach churned, sensing a trap. Vanessa reached into her purse, pulling out a small stack of crumpled bills, enough for a few meals, maybe a night in a shelter. She slid them across the table, her eyes locking onto Lila's. "It's simple," Vanessa continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "At the Christmas gala tomorrow, I'll give a toast. When I raise my glass, you'll kiss James right before everyone. Nothing too dramatic, just enough to make a scene." Lila's breath caught her mind reeling. Why, she stammered, her hands trembling as they hovered near the money. Vanessa's smile tightened, revealing a glimpse of the bitterness that drove her. Years ago, a divorce had stripped her of wealth and status, leaving her to claw her way back through charm and manipulation. She had honed her skill at exploiting men like James, whose trust made them easy targets. The diamond ring, a prize worth thousands, was her ticket to financial security, and a staged betrayal would ensure she kept it without the burden of marriage. "Let's say I need to shake things up," she said, her tone icy. "You do this, and you'll get more than this pittance. Cross me, and you'll regret it. I know where to find people like you." The threat hung heavy, her eyes narrowing as she leaned closer. Clear Lila's heart pounded, her fingers brushing the bills. Money was a lifeline, food warmth, and a chance to survive another day. But the act Vanessa demanded felt like a betrayal of the one person who had shown her kindness. She thought of James's gentle voice, insistence that she stay warm, and guilt twisted in her chest. Yet the memory of last night's freezing alley, the wind cutting through her coat, silenced her objections. I'll do it," she whispered, her voice breaking as she took the money, her fingers trembling with shame. Vanessa's smile widened, a glint of triumph in her eyes. "Good girl," she said, patting Lila's shoulder, as if congratulating a subordinate. "Don't think of backing out." As Vanessa stood smoothing her dress, Lila tucked the bills into her coat, their weight heavier than the hunger in her stomach. Vanessa rejoined James at the counter, her demeanor shifting to a radiant charm as she looped her arm through his. "Ready to go, darling?" she called, her voice sweet enough to mask her scheming. James nodded, unaware of the deal struck in his absence. Lila watched them leave, Vanessa's final glance back at her, a silent reminder of their pact. The restaurant doors swung shut, and the cold rushed in, mirroring the chill in Lila's heart. She lingered, the soup bowl empty, the pianist's notes fading. The money in her pocket was a lifeline, but it chained her to a game she didn't want to play. As the waiter cleared her table, she whispered a quiet "thank you," her mind racing with the consequences of her choice. Outside, the snow fell thicker, and Lila knew she had stepped into a trap that could unravel everything. The snow fell relentlessly over Boston's darkened streets, blanketing the sidewalks in a deceptive hush that muffled Lila's footsteps. She trudged through the back bay, her frayed coat offering little defense against the December wind that stung her cheeks. The crumpled bills Vanessa had given her weighed heavily in her pocket, each a reminder of the deal she'd made, a kiss to betray James, the only person who'd shown her kindness in months. The city's Christmas lights twinkled in shop windows, their festive glow a stark contrast to the despair knotting her stomach. Lila's braided hair, now matted and damp, clung to her neck as she ducked into an alley seeking shelter beneath a sagging awning. Her mind churned with memories of better days. A year ago, she'd been a nurse's aide, wiping brows and holding hands in a bustling hospital ward, her savings earmarked for nursing school. She'd dreamed of a future where she could heal others, a purpose born from watching her mother, a single parent, struggle through illness without proper care. But budget cuts had stolen that dream, leaving Lila jobless, and soon after homeless when she couldn't pay rent. Now survival meant scavenging for warmth and food each day, eroding the hope she'd once clung to. The money in her pocket. Vanessa's bribe was enough for a meal or two, maybe a night in a shelter, but it came at a cost she could barely stomach. Lila stopped before a convenience store, its neon sign buzzing faintly. A large mirror reflected her haggard face through the window, sunken cheeks, shadowed eyes, a stranger staring back. "Who am I becoming?" she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. The reflection showed a woman far from the caregiver who once comforted patients with a gentle smile. She thought of James, his blue eyes filled with compassion when he'd insisted she stay warm, and guilt twisted like a blade. He didn't deserve betrayal. Yet, Vanessa's threat, "I know where to find people like you," echoed in her mind, chilling her more than the wind. Lila clutched the bills torn between survival and the values her mother had instilled, honesty, even when it hurt. She wandered further, passing a street corner where carolers sang joy to the world, their voices a painful reminder of the life she'd lost. A memory surfaced Christmas Eve, with her mother decorating a tiny tree with paper ornaments, laughing despite their poverty. That warmth felt unreachable now, replaced by the cold reality of Vanessa's scheme. Lila's fingers tightened around the money. She could return it, walk away, face the streets again. But the hunger gnawing at her stomach, the ache in her bones from sleeping on concrete, silenced her resolve. Just this once, she told herself, the lie bitter on her tongue. She needed to eat, survive, and make it through another day. Slipping into a dimly lit diner, Lila ordered a coffee and a day-old muffin, the cheapest items on the menu. The warmth of the mug soothed her trembling hands as she sat at the counter, the scent of grease and burnt toast oddly comforting. She sipped slowly, her thoughts spiraling. Vanessa's plan was simple: kiss James at the gala, create a scandal, and let her claim the ring. However, the act felt like a violation not just of James's trust, but of her integrity. She remembered her mother's words, "You're stronger than you know, Lila. Don't let the world break you." Yet here she was on the verge of breaking herself for a handful of dollars. As she nibbled the muffin, a television above the counter played a news segment about holiday charity drives, showing smiling volunteers serving meals to people experiencing homelessness. Lila's chest tightened. She'd once been the one helping, not the one needing help. The contrast fueled a spark of defiance. She couldn't let Vanessa's manipulation define her. But what choice did she have? Returning the money meant facing the cold, empty-handed, risking Vanessa's wrath. Keeping it meant betraying a man who'd seen her as more than a shadow under a table. The diner's clock ticked past midnight, and Lila knew the gala was hours away. She had to decide. Finishing her coffee, she stepped back into the snow, the bills still in her pocket. The city's festive lights seemed to mock her, their brightness highlighting her isolation. She passed a church, its stained glass windows glowing with scenes of compassion, and paused. A memory of her mother praying for strength flickered in her mind, and Lila whispered a silent plea for guidance. The money was a lifeline, but it tethered her to a lie. As she huddled beneath the awning, the wind howling around her, Lila's resolve wavered, but a seed of determination took root. She didn't know how, but she vowed to find a way out of Vanessa's trap, to hold on to the person she used to be, even if it meant facing the cold alone. The grand ballroom of Boston's Harborview Hotel sparkled with the magic of Christmas Eve. Its towering ceiling, adorned with cascading chandeliers that cast prisms of light across the polished marble floor. A 15-foot Christmas tree dominated the center, draped in crimson ribbons and golden ornaments that shimmered in time with a string quartet's rendition of Carol of the Bells. Guests in tailored suits and glittering gowns mingled their laughter, mingling with the clink of champagne flutes. James stood near the stage, his navy suit crisp but his hands unsteady, the velvet box in his pocket, a constant reminder of the proposal he'd planned for tonight. His blonde hair was neatly combed, but sweat beaded at his temples as he scanned the crowd for Vanessa, his heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. Vanessa swept into the room, her winter gown a cascade of silver that caught every eye. Her auburn hair styled in a sophisticated updo framed a face radiating confidence as if she were the evening's centerpiece. She greeted guests with a radiant smile, her charm masking the calculated plan she'd set in motion. James caught her eye, offering a nervous smile, but her nod was brief, her attention already shifting to a group of donors. He pushed aside a flicker of doubt, reminding himself of the love he'd invested in her, the sacrifices he'd made for the ring. Tonight, he thought would bind them forever. Outside, Lila lingered in the shadows of the hotel's entrance, her frayed coat stark against the opulence of arriving guests. The cold bit at her exposed hands, and her braided hair damp from fresh snow clung to her neck. The money Vanessa had given her was tucked deep in her pocket, a heavy reminder of the task ahead. Her stomach churned with guilt. She'd spent the day wrestling with her decision, haunted by her mother's words about strength and honesty. But the memory of hunger and freezing nights had kept her from returning the cash. Now, as she watched couples stream into the gala, she felt like an intruder in a world that had rejected her. Inside the quartet paused, and Vanessa ascended the stage, her silver gown gleaming under the spotlight. She took the microphone, her voice smooth, as she spoke of Christmas's spirit, love, unity, and new beginnings. The crowd listened, captivated, as she wove a tale of devotion, her eyes briefly meeting Lila's through the open doorway. With a subtle lift of her champagne flute, Vanessa gave the signal. Lila's breath caught her heart racing as she pushed through the crowd, her worn shoes slipping on the marble. She reached James just as he stepped toward the stage, his hand reaching for the ring box ready to propose. "I'm sorry," Lila whispered, her voice trembling as she leaned in and quickly kissed his cheek. The act was fleeting, but electric, freezing the room in stunned silence. James staggered back, his blue eyes wide with shock, the velvet box slipping from his fingers into Lila's tattered bag as she stumbled in her haste. Gasps rippled through the crowd, phones flashing to capture the scene. Vanessa descended the stage, her face contorted in feigned outrage. "What is this?" she cried, her voice shrill. "James, how could you?" She clutched her chest, tears welling theatrically as she pointed at Lila. "You humiliate me with her." James stood frozen, his mind reeling. The warmth of Lila's kiss lingered, but her apologetic eyes told a different story, one of coercion, not intent. "Vanessa." "I don't," he stammered, but her voice drowned him out. "I saw you with her, in front of everyone." She turned to the crowd, her sobs calculated. "I deserve better. That ring, it's mine now for this betrayal." The guests murmured some whispering about scandal, others questioning the scene's authenticity. Lila backed away, her heart pounding the weight of the ring box in her bag, unnoticed amidst the chaos. James reached for his pocket, his face paling as he realized the box was gone. "The ring," he muttered, scanning the floor, his proposal crumbling before it began. Vanessa seized the moment, addressing the crowd. "She stole it. That girl took my ring." Her finger jabbed toward Lila, who was already retreating toward the exit, her eyes wide with panic. Security moved in, but Lila slipped through the doors, vanishing into the snowy night. James stood rooted, the sting of Vanessa's accusations clashing with the memory of Lila's desperate gaze. The quartet resumed, but the music felt hollow, the festive lights mocking his shattered plans. As Vanessa played the victim sobbing to sympathetic guests, James's heart sank, not just for the lost ring, but for the truth he sensed lurking beneath the spectacle. The Harborview Hotel's ballroom moments ago, a stage for festive elegance, now buzzed with a different energy, whispers of scandal, the sharp clink of glasses set down in haste, and the rustle of gowns as guests craned to witness the unfolding drama. The Christmas tree's golden lights flickered, casting long shadows across the marble floor, where James stood, his hands empty, his heart racing. His navy suit felt stifling, his blonde hair disheveled from running his fingers through it in disbelief. The velvet box with the diamond ring, the centerpiece of his planned proposal, was gone, lost in the chaos of Lila's unexpected kiss and Vanessa's explosive accusations. He scanned the floor, his blue eyes darting frantically, but the ring was nowhere to be seen. Vanessa's silver gown, shimmering with each dramatic gesture, played the role of betrayed fiancée to perfection. "She stole it," she cried, pointing toward the ballroom's exit, where Lila had vanished into the snowy night. Her auburn hair gleamed under the chandeliers as she addressed the crowd, tears streaking her makeup in a calculated display. "That girl, Lila. She took my ring, after ruining our moment." Guests murmured, some nodding sympathetically, others whispering doubts about the scene's theatricality. Security guards, summoned by Vanessa's outburst, radioed for backup, their stern faces scanning the crowd. James tried to speak, his voice lost in the uproar. "Vanessa, I didn't. There's no way she—" But her glare silenced him, her eyes flashing with a fury that felt too polished, too rehearsed. Outside, Lila ran through Boston's icy streets, her frayed coat flapping against her legs. The cold bit at her exposed hands, and her braided hair, damp with snow, clung to her face. The weight of Vanessa's money still burned in her pocket, but a new, heavier burden pressed against her, a strange bulk in her tattered bag. She ducked into an alley, her breath ragged, rummaged inside her fingers, brushing against the smooth velvet box. Her heart stopped as she opened it, the diamond ring glinting even in the dim streetlight. "No," she whispered, panic rising. She hadn't taken it intentionally. It must have fallen into her bag during the chaos of the kiss. But who would believe her? Vanessa's accusations echoed in her mind, branding her a thief before she could explain. Lila's thoughts spiraled as she clutched the box, her guilt warring with fear. She remembered James's kindness at the restaurant, insistence that she eat, and the shame of betraying him, twisted like a knife. She wanted to return the ring to undo the mess Vanessa had forced her into, but the risk was too significant. Security would seize her if she returned, and Vanessa's narrative would paint her as a criminal. The snow fell thicker, blurring the city's festive lights, and Lila felt more alone than ever, a fugitive in a world that had already judged her. Back in the ballroom, James retreated to a corner, his mind replaying the kiss. Lila's whispered apology, her eyes filled with regret. It didn't add up. Why would she kiss him? Then flee Vanessa's theatrics felt too convenient, and her demand for the ring was too swift. He thought of the sacrifices he'd made for her, the months of overtime to afford the ring, the trust he'd rebuilt after a past betrayal. His stomach churned with doubt, not just about Lila, but about Vanessa herself. Had he been blind to her true nature? A friend approached offering a sympathetic pat, but James waved him off. "I need air," he muttered, stepping toward the exit, the cold night beckoning. Vanessa, meanwhile, cornered a security guard, her voice rising. "Find that girl! She's a thief!" She clutched her purse, her composure slipping as she realized the ring was gone. Her plan had been flawless: stage the betrayal, claim the ring as compensation. But Lila's disappearance with the prize was an unforeseen snag. She scanned the crowd, her charm faltering as whispers grew. Was it stolen? One guest murmured. It seemed staged, another added. Vanessa's jaw tightened, and she slipped away to call an associate, her voice low and urgent. "Find her. She can't get far." James entered the snowy parking lot, the cold cutting through his suit. The Christmas lights lining the street pulsed mockingly, their cheer a stark contrast to the emptiness in his chest. He didn't know where Lila had gone, but her frightened eyes haunted him. She wasn't a thief, he felt it in his gut. But Vanessa's accusations, now spreading through the gala's gossip, threatened to ruin more than his proposal. His reputation, finances, and trust hung in the balance. As he hailed a cab, his thoughts turned to finding Lila, not to accuse her, but to understand the truth behind the night that had shattered his plans. The snow fell in heavy sheets outside James's modest apartment in Boston's South End, the streetlights casting a muted glow through his frost-covered window. Inside, the air was thick with silence, broken only by the faint hum of a radiator struggling against the December chill. James sat on the edge of his couch, his navy suit jacket crumpled beside him, his blonde hair disheveled from restless hands. The events of the Christmas gala replayed in his mind like a fractured film reel. Lila's fleeting kiss, Vanessa's theatrical outrage, the missing diamond ring that had cost him months of overtime. His blue eyes stared blankly at the coffee table, where a half-empty mug of tea had long gone cold. The weight of the night pressed on his chest, a mix of humiliation, confusion, and a gnawing sense that he'd been played. James had always trusted too easily, a flaw rooted in his childhood, in a tight-knit Boston suburb. His parents had taught him to see the good in people, but that optimism had burned him 5 years ago, when a business partner vanished with his savings, leaving him to rebuild from nothing. Vanessa had seemed different. Her charm, passion for art, and promises of a shared future had rekindled his faith in love. Yet, tonight's spectacle at the Harborview Hotel cracked that illusion. Her demand for the ring, her swift accusation against Lila, felt too polished, too calculated. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and rubbed his temples, trying to piece together the puzzle. Why had Lila kissed him? Her whispered apology, her eyes brimming with regret, didn't align with Vanessa's narrative of a scheming thief. His phone buzzed on the table, a string of messages from friends who'd witnessed the gala's chaos. "Are you okay?" One read, "That was wild." Another said, laced with gossip. James ignored them, his thoughts drifting to Vanessa's behavior in recent weeks, her insistence on a pricier ring, her secretive phone calls, her coldness at the restaurant when Lila appeared. He'd dismissed it as stress, but now each moment felt like a clue. Had she orchestrated the scandal? The idea twisted his stomach for the financial loss and the betrayal of his trust. He'd poured his heart into their relationship, sacrificing nights at the office to afford her desires, only to be humiliated in front of Boston's elite. A knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. 2 friends from the gala. Mark and Sarah stood in the hallway, their coats dusted with snow. Sarah said, "We couldn't just leave you to deal with this alone." her voice soft but urgent. They settled on the couch, and Mark leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Something's off, James. A few days ago, I saw Vanessa talking to that girl Lila in an alley near the jewelry district. She looked intense, like she was giving orders." Sarah nodded, adding, "Yeah." And at the restaurant, Vanessa was way too quick to call her out. It felt planned. James's heart raced, the pieces clicking into place. "You're saying Vanessa knew Lila before the gala?" he asked, his voice tight. Mark shrugged, uncertain. It looked suspicious. "I didn't think much of it then, but after tonight." James clenched his fists, anger mixing with a pang of guilt. He'd defended Lila at the restaurant, seen her desperation, yet Vanessa had painted her as a criminal. His mind flashed to Lila's trembling form, her eyes pleading for understanding. She wasn't a thief, he felt it in his bones. But Vanessa's accusations had turned her into a fugitive, and he'd done nothing to stop it. He stood pacing the small living room, the hardwood creaking under his shoes. "I need to find Lila," he said, more to himself than his friends. "She's caught up in this, and I need to know why." Sarah frowned, concerned. "Be careful, James. Vanessa's already spinning this to make you look bad. People are talking." James nodded, but his resolve hardened. The ring was gone. His reputation tarnished, but the truth mattered more. He thought of his sister, whose recovery he'd supported through countless setbacks. If he could help her, he could help Lila and expose whatever game Vanessa was playing. As Mark and Sarah left, promising to ask around for leads, James grabbed his coat, the cold air bracing him as he stepped outside. The snow muffled the city's sounds, but the festive lights lining the street felt like a taunt, reminding him of the crumbling proposal. He didn't know where Lila was, but he knew she held the key to unraveling Vanessa's lies. With each step, his doubt in Vanessa grew, replaced by a determination to find Lila, hear her story, and reclaim the truth from the night's wreckage. The Boston night was a blur of snow and shadow as Lila darted through a narrow alley, her breath puffing in frantic clouds. Her frayed coat flapped against her legs, the damp fabric heavy with melted snow, and her braided hair, now loose and tangled, clung to her face. The velvet box containing the diamond ring pressed against her side in her tattered bag, a constant reminder of the chaos at the Harborview Hotel gala. Vanessa's accusations branding her a thief echoed in her mind, each word a lash driving her deeper into the city's underbelly. She ducked behind a dumpster, her heart pounding as she heard the crunch of footsteps nearby. Two men, their bulky jackets and complex expressions marking them as Vanessa's hired muscles scanned the alley, their voices low and menacing. One growled, "She can't have gone far," his flashlight beam slicing through the dark. Lila pressed herself against the cold metal, her fingers trembling as they gripped the bag. The ring, an accidental burden from the gala's chaos, was her only proof of innocence, but it also made her a target. She thought of James, his kind eyes at the restaurant, and guilt surged anew. She hadn't meant to betray him, but Vanessa's bribe, born of desperation, had trapped her in a web she couldn't escape. The men moved closer, their boots crunching in the snow, and Lila's pulse raced. She couldn't let them find her, not with the ring or Vanessa's lies painting her as a criminal. Seizing a moment as the flashlight swung away, Lila bolted her shoes, slipping on the icy pavement. A sharp pain shot through her leg as she scraped against a jagged fence, blood seeping through her torn pants. She stifled a cry, limping into another alley, her breath ragged. The cold was merciless, but fear drove her forward. She needed to survive, to find a way to return the ring to James and clear her name. In a quiet corner, she crouched beside a stack of discarded crates, her hands shaking as she opened her bag. The ring's diamond glinted its brilliance, mocking her plight. She considered throwing it away, but it was her only leverage against Vanessa's accusations. Lila's thoughts drifted to her mother's lessons, strength in adversity, honesty above all. She'd lost so much since her hospital job vanished her apartment, her dreams of nursing school, her sense of self. But she couldn't lose her integrity. The ring wasn't hers, and keeping it would make her no better than Vanessa. Her resolve hardened, sparked by a memory of her mother's smile during a lean Christmas, sharing a single candlelit meal. "We're rich in spirit," her mother had said. Lila whispered to herself, "I have to make this right." But first, she needed resources to move through the city undetected. She remembered a salon in a gritty part of town that bought hair for extensions. Her braids, though unkempt, were long and thick, a remnant of the care she'd once taken in her appearance. With a heavy heart, she made her way to the dimly lit storefront, its sign flickering. "Hair salon, we buy hair." Inside, the air smelled of chemicals and cheap perfume. The sleepy attendant glanced at her unimpressed, but nodded when Lila said, "I want to sell my hair." Seated before a cracked mirror, Lila watched as the scissors snipped away her braids, each cut a sacrifice of her past self. The attendant weighed the bundle and handed her a small stack of bills, not much, but enough for food and a bus ticket to keep moving. With the money, Lila bought a stale sandwich and a coffee at a nearby diner, the warmth easing her hunger, but not her fear. As she ate, she overheard a news report on the diner's television. A homeless woman is suspected of stealing a valuable ring at a Christmas gala. Her heart sank. She was a fugitive now, hunted by Vanessa's lies and the police. The ring felt heavier in her bag, a symbol of her entanglement. She needed to find James, return it, and explain. But how Vanessa's men were relentless, and the city's festive glow hid 1,000 eyes waiting to spot her. Lila found a makeshift shelter in a deserted lot, an abandoned shed with a sagging roof. Rummaging through the clutter, she stumbled on an old jewelry catalog, its pages marked with circled rings and dates that predated James and Vanessa's relationship. Her breath caught. Vanessa had done this before, manipulating others for profit. The discovery fueled Lila's determination. She wouldn't let Vanessa win, not when James's kindness had given her a glimpse of hope. Clutching the catalog, she vowed to find him to expose Vanessa's scheme, even if it meant risking everything. The snow fell outside, but Lila's resolve burned brighter, aflame against the cold, driving her toward a confrontation she couldn't avoid. The Boston night was a frozen labyrinth, its streets cloaked in snow that muffled the distant hum of Christmas carols. James drove slowly through the city's underbelly, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his navy suit rumpled from hours of searching. His blonde hair fell across his forehead, and his blue eyes scanned every shadow, driven by a resolve that had crystallized since the gala's chaos. The diamond ring was gone, his trust in Vanessa shattered, but Lila's apologetic eyes haunted him. She wasn't a thief. He felt it deep in his gut, a conviction rooted in the same instinct that had urged him to help his sister through her darkest days. He had to find Lila to hear her truth and unravel Vanessa's lies. James spotted a flicker of movement near an abandoned metro station, its entrance boarded up and littered with snow-dusted debris. A figure huddled near a rusted gate, her silhouette barely discernible against the dim streetlights. He slowed his car, his heart racing, and parked at a safe distance. Stepping out, the cold bit at his exposed hands, but he pressed forward, his shoes crunching on the icy pavement. "Lila," he called softly, his voice echoing in the deserted lot. The figure flinched, retreating deeper into the shadows, her tattered coat blending with the darkness. James raised his hands, palms open. "It's me, James, from the restaurant. I'm not here to hurt you." Lila's breath caught her cropped hair, shorn from selling her braids, hidden beneath a frayed hood. Her leg throbbed from the fence scratch, and the weight of the ring in her bag felt like a chain. She'd spent the night dodging Vanessa's men, her body aching from cold and fear. Hearing James's gentle yet firm voice stirred a mix of relief and dread. She stepped forward, her eyes wary, but searching his face for judgment. Finding none, she whispered, "Why are you here?" Her voice was hoarse, cracked from exhaustion and the weight of her guilt. "I need to understand what happened," James said, his tone earnest. "It doesn't add up at the gala, your kiss, Vanessa's accusations. I know you're not a thief." Lila's shoulders sagged, the sincerity in his eyes breaking through her defenses. She limped closer, wincing, and James noticed the bloodstain on her pants. "You're hurt," he said, concern etching his face. "Come with me. My car's warm and we can talk." Lila hesitated, glancing at the dark alley, half expecting Vanessa's men to appear. "You didn't want to do it." Lila's tears welled, her guilt spilling over. "The ring, it fell into my bag during the chaos. I didn't steal it, I swear." She reached into her bag, pulling out the velvet box, the diamond glinting in the dashboard's dim light. "This is yours. I tried to return it, but Vanessa's men are after me, and the police think I'm a thief." James took the ring, his fingers brushing the box as he processed her words. The financial strain of buying it, months of overtime, drained savings paled against the sting of Vanessa's deception. He thought of his past, trusting a partner who'd betrayed him, and saw the same manipulation in Vanessa's calculated charm. "I believe you," he said, his voice firm. "Vanessa set this up, and we're going to prove it. Together." Lila's eyes widened, hope flickering amidst her fear. How she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The gala had security cameras," James said, his mind racing. "If we can get the footage, it might show Vanessa bribing you. And I have the receipt for the ring. It proves it's mine, not hers." Lila nodded, clutching the old jewelry catalog she'd found, its marked pages, hinting at Vanessa's past scams. "I found this," she said, showing him the circled rings and dates. "She's done this before." James's eyes narrowed, his resolve hardening. "Then we'll expose her. But first you need to rest, and that leg needs cleaning." He started the car, glancing at Lila. "We're in this together now." Lila leaned back, the heater's warmth a small comfort against her fear. For the first time in days, she wasn't alone. As James drove, the snow falling gently outside, their shared determination formed a fragile bond, a promise to face Vanessa's lies and reclaim the truth. The Harborview Hotel stood quiet under a gray Boston morning. Its festive lights dimmed the grand ballroom, now a hollow shell of last night's gala. Snow dusted the sidewalks, and a bitter wind rattled the bare trees outside. James parked his car a block away, his navy suit creased from a sleepless night, his blonde hair tucked under a wool cap to avoid attention. Beside him, Lila pulled her frayed hood low, her cropped hair barely covering her ears, her legs still aching from the fence scratch. The diamond ring, now back in James's possession, sat in his glove box, its weight a reminder of the truth they sought. Their breaths fogged in the cold as they approached the venue's side entrance, determined to find security footage that could expose Vanessa's bribe. Inside the lobby was stark, its marble floor reflecting the dim glow of a single chandelier. A lone receptionist glanced up, her eyes widening at James's familiar face. "You're back," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "After everything?" James forced a calm smile, his blue eyes steady. "We need to see the manager. It's urgent." Lila stayed close, her hands shoved deep in her pockets, and the old jewelry catalog was tucked in her bag as a backup plan. The receptionist hesitated, then buzzed the manager, who emerged from a back office, his face etched with exhaustion. Mr. Carter said, his tone wary. "This place has been a circus since the gala. What do you want?" James said. "We need the security footage from last night," his voice firm. "It'll show what happened." The manager frowned, glancing at Lila, whose nervous stance betrayed her fear. "The police took most of it," he said. "Your fiancée Vanessa was here with them, claiming theft." James's jaw tightened at the word fiancé. "She's not my fiancé anymore," he said. "And Lila didn't steal anything. We think Vanessa set this up." Lila stepped forward, her voice trembling, but resolute. "There's footage of her giving me money before the gala. It proves she planned the whole thing." Before the manager could respond, the lobby doors swung open, and Vanessa stormed in, her auburn hair loose and wild, her silver coat flung over a tailored suit. 2 police officers and a man in a crisp blazer, likely her lawyer, flanked her. Her eyes locked onto Lila, and a smug smile curled her lips. "I knew you'd show up," she said, her voice dripping with venom and trying to cover your tracks. She turned to the officers, her tone shifting to wounded innocence. "They're tampering with evidence, Captain. Arrest them." The lead officer, a stern man with a notepad, raised a hand for silence, his gaze flicking between Lila and James. James stepped forward, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "We're here for the truth, Vanessa. You bribed Lila to kiss me and staged the scandal to get the ring. I have the receipt. It's mine, not yours." Vanessa laughed, sharp and sarcastic. "You gave it to me, James. An engagement gift. And now you're conspiring with this thief." Her gesture toward Lila drew murmurs from a few employees gathering at the lobby's edge, their phones poised to capture the drama. Lila's heart pounded, but she held her ground, her eyes meeting James's for reassurance. The manager cleared his throat, sensing the tension. He said there might be backup footage upstairs, but the police had already searched the office. The officer nodded. "Let's check it. If there's evidence, we need to see it." The group moved to a cramped second-floor office, the air thick with anticipation. Vanessa whispered urgently to her lawyer, her confidence wavering. The manager powered on an outdated computer, its screen flickering as files loaded. Most were corrupted or copied, but a security staffer rushed in clutching a USB drive. "Found this at the desk," he said, breathless. "It's a backup." The drive clicked into the computer, and a grainy video played. It showed Vanessa cornering Lila in a secluded gala hallway, handing her a stack of bills, her posture commanding. The footage wasn't definitive. Audio was absent, but it contradicted Vanessa's claim of never knowing Lila. "That's out of context." Vanessa snapped, her voice shrill. "I was helping her, not bribing her." The officer's eyes narrowed, skepticism etching his face. Lila's breath caught hope flickering. James pressed forward, holding up the ring's receipt. "This proves I bought it." Vanessa planned to keep it through lies. The crowd buzzed, employees whispering, as Vanessa's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The officer turned to Vanessa. "You denied knowing her yet. There's footage of you together." Why? Vanessa stammered, her charm crumbling. I was being charitable." The officer shook his head. "We'll take this to the station. All of you come with us." Lila's heart sank, fearing arrest, but James's steady glance strengthened her. The footage wasn't enough to clear her yet, but it cracked Vanessa's narrative, and with James by her side, Lila felt a spark of courage to face the fight ahead. The cramped office at the Harborview Hotel buzzed with tension, the hum of the old computer mingling with the muffled howl of the Boston wind outside. Snowflakes tapped against the window, starkly contrasting the heated confrontation unfolding within. James stood firm. His navy suit creased his blonde hair, slightly askew under his wool cap, clutching the ring's receipt like a lifeline. Lila, her cropped hair peeking from her frayed hood, held her breath beside him, her tattered bag slung across her shoulder. The jewelry catalog inside, a silent testament to Vanessa's schemes. The grainy security footage on the computer screen, Vanessa handing Lila money in a secluded gala hallway, had cracked her narrative, and the air was thick with anticipation. Vanessa stood near the door, her silver coat draped over her arm, her auburn hair loose and wild, betraying her fraying composure. Her lawyer, a man with a pinched expression, whispered urgently, but her eyes darted between the police officers, the manager, and the gathered employees, who watched with barely concealed curiosity. "This is ridiculous." Vanessa snapped, her voice shrill as she pointed at Lila. "That footage proves nothing. I was helping her, not bribing her." The lead officer, Captain Hayes, a grizzled man with a skeptical frown, crossed his arms. "You claimed you'd never met her before the gala," he said, his tone sharp. "This video says otherwise." "Why lie?" Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came. Her carefully crafted facade, honed through years of manipulating wealthy partners, after a divorce left her destitute, began to crumble. She'd thrived on charm and deception, targeting men like James for their trust and resources. But the evidence was mounting. James stepped forward, his blue eyes blazing with resolve. "She planned the whole thing," he said, holding up the receipt. "This ring is mine. I bought it for a proposal she sabotaged." Lila was coerced. Vanessa used her desperation to stage a scandal. Lila nodded, her voice steady, despite her trembling hands. "She paid me to kiss him, to make it look like betrayal, so that she could claim the ring." The room buzzed with murmurs, employees exchanging glances as Vanessa's lawyer cleared his throat, his defense faltering. Captain Hayes turned to the manager. "Any more footage?" The manager shook his head, but a young security staffer piped up. "The parking lot cameras might have caught something. They're on a separate system." Before Vanessa could protest, the officer ordered the files checked. The screen flickered to life, showing Vanessa in the lot before the gala, speaking heatedly with a man in a dark jacket, likely one of her hired enforcers. The image was blurry, but it fueled the officer's suspicion. As the tension rose, a second officer entered holding a phone. "Captain, we got a call from Providence PD," he said, glancing at Vanessa. "They've got unfiled complaints about a woman matching her description. Same MO, staging breakups to claim jewelry. She used aliases, but the patterns match." Vanessa's face paled, her hands clenching her coat. "That's absurd," she cried, but her voice cracked, betraying her panic. James seized the moment, his anger tempered by clarity. "You did this before, didn't you? How many others, Vanessa?" Her eyes darted to her lawyer, who looked defeated, unable to counter the mounting evidence. Lila, bolstered by James's support, pulled the ring from her bag, still wrapped in its dirty cloth. "She said I didn't steal this," handing it to Captain Hayes. "It fell into my bag during the gala. I wanted to return it, but she pointed at Vanessa and made sure I'd be chased and branded a thief." The officer examined the diamond, its brilliance stark against the grim office. He turned to James. "This receipt checks out. The ring's yours." Vanessa lunged forward, her voice desperate. "He promised it to me. It's compensation for his betrayal." But the officer silenced her. "Enough. You're coming to the station for questioning on fraud and false reporting." Vanessa's composure shattered, her eyes flashing with rage as she glared at Lila. "You'll regret this," she hissed, but the officers escorted her out, her lawyer trailing behind, muttering about damage control. The employees dispersed, whispering about the scandal, their phones no longer recording. The manager sighed, relief softening his tired face. "I hope this clears things up," he said to James and Lila. "I saw Vanessa pressuring me to delete footage yesterday. Should have known something was off." James pocketed the ring, its weight now a symbol of his naivety. He turned to Lila, gratitude in his eyes. "You didn't have to come back, but you did. Thank you." Lila's shoulders relaxed, the burden of suspicion lifting. She said, "I couldn't let her win," her voice soft but firm. As they left the office, the snow outside fell gently, the city's festive glow returning with a promise of resolution. Vanessa's schemes were unraveling, and with the ring returned and her lies exposed, James and Lila stood on the cusp of freedom from her deception. The snow had softened to a gentle flurry outside James's inherited cottage, in a quiet corner of Boston's outskirts, its weathered, clapboard walls glowing under the faint light of a street lamp. Inside, a modest Christmas tree stood in the living room, adorned with mismatched ornaments salvaged from the attic, their chipped surfaces catching the twinkle of clearance string lights. The scent of roasted potatoes and a simple stew filled the air, a humble feast simmering on the stove. James, his navy suit replaced by a worn sweater set, the table carefully, his blonde hair falling loosely across his forehead. Lila, her cropped hair tucked behind her ears, adjusted a clean bandage on her healing leg wound, her frayed coat swapped for a second-hand sweater that felt like a luxury. The heater's warmth enveloped them starkly, contrasting the cold nights that had defined her recent past. Days earlier, the police station had been a whirlwind of statements and evidence. Vanessa, her auburn hair disheveled under harsh fluorescent lights, faced charges of attempted fraud and false reporting after the security footage and Providence PD's complaints exposed her pattern of scams. Her lawyer's attempts to deflect blame crumbled against James's receipt for the ring and Lila's testimony, which detailed the coerced kiss and Vanessa's threats. The police cleared Lila of theft. Her name was no longer tied to the gala's scandal. The ring, once a symbol of his trust in Vanessa, had been a costly lesson. He thought of his past, the betrayal by a business partner that had taught him caution, and realized Lila's honesty had restored his faith in something genuine. He admitted, "I was so caught up in pleasing Vanessa," his blue eyes meeting hers. "I didn't see how empty it was. You risked everything to give back that ring." Lila shook her head, a shy smile breaking through. "It wasn't mine. And you gave me a chance to be more than a shadow." They ate in comfortable silence, the stew's warmth grounding them in the moment. Lila shared her dream of returning to nursing school, a goal she'd shelved when homelessness took over. She said, "I want to help people again," her voice bright with purpose. "I could start small, find a job, and save up." James nodded, his mind already turning to the cottage's spare room. He said, "This place is simple, but it's yours as long as you need it. No one should face the cold alone, especially not at Christmas." Lila's eyes glistened, memories of freezing alleys and judgmental stares fading in the warmth of his offer. She thought of the gala, the weight of Vanessa's money, and how close she'd come to losing herself. "I almost forgot who I was," she whispered. "But you reminded me." James reached across the table, his hand brushing hers, a gesture of solidarity rather than romance. "You reminded me what matters," he said. "Not rings or wealth, but this trust, honesty." The tree's lights flickered, casting a soft glow over their modest meal. Outside, distant church bells chimed their notes, promising a new beginning. James glanced at the drawer where the ring had once sat, now empty, its sale a final break from Vanessa's deception. He didn't need it to feel rich, not when Lila's sincerity lit the room. As they cleared the table, sharing stories of simpler Christmases from their pasts, the cottage felt like a sanctuary where two wounded souls could heal. The snow fell quietly, blanketing the world in peace, and for the first time in weeks, James and Lila faced the future, not with fear, but with hope.